Hello everyone, and welcome to the Complete Python programming course. This is a beginner introduction to dates and times in Python. This video is part of the beginner tutorial. Python has a very good built-in support for dates and times. Working with dates and times can be a bit challenging. This will be a brief introduction. We will not go into too much details. To work with the dates and times, Python gives us the date and time module. Datetime, the name of the module, is datetime. The datetime module allows us to work with date objects, time objects, and datetime objects. We will see examples about the three of the type of the objects. The first one is the date object. Today equals date, time, date, and today. Notice that I am calling the today function on the date object, on the date module. Let's print that and see what returns. Print today, and let's run our code, Python 3 main.py, and it returned a string representing today's object. A string is not very helpful to work with, but this actually just the print statement. The print statement converted the date object into a string for display. If we try to access the type of this object, type today, it will return something else and will say that it is a date object from the datetime module. Now, let's say something else. Next month equals date, time, date. And the date itself is a function that allows me to construct a date object. Let's take 2020, 11, and 25th. The date function, you can call it with arguments, and you have to use three arguments: year, month, and day. And it will construct a date object from these values. Let's try that. Let's keep today on the screen and let's print next month. Let's run our code, and it returned two objects. The first one is today's date. The second one is the next month date that I supplied to the date function. Now that's much more helpful. If you have objects, you can interact with them in many different ways. Let's try to see the days difference between these two dates. Difference equals next month minus today. Let's print that as well. Print difference. Let's run our code and see what returns. And we have the first one, the second one, and we have 33 days. That looks like a string, and it has a time, some kind of time format after that. Notice that 33 days. If you want to work with that, you will have problems, but this is actually, again, it's an object, not a string. So the difference actually has a type. Type difference. Let's see what that returns, and it returns datetime.timedelta. The time delta allows you to work with differences between days, changes in dates, delta. Now, let's see what we can do with our time delta module. If it's a time delta, it's an object, not a string, I can interact with it in different ways. Days. It has an attribute, days, and let's see what that attribute returns. Run our code, and it did return 33 days. Now that's much more helpful. This way we can tell the difference between two dates. This is not restricted to subtracting a bigger date or smaller date from a bigger one. You can do it the other way. Today minus next month. Let's see how that goes. And we print our code, and it actually will return minus 33 days, which is very helpful. You can subtract smaller date from a bigger date or bigger date from a smaller date. That's much more helpful. Let's see what else we can do with our time delta object. Let's stay with today. We can actually construct a time delta object ourselves, and it is much easier than it looks. Next month equals today plus date time delta Notice time delta takes arguments, and one of the arguments it takes is days equals 30. I'm asking Python to add 30 days to today and return the value. Let's see what that returns for next month, instead of constructing it by supplying it a date object here. Let's run this code and leave the terminal and run our code, and it did actually return 22nd of November 2020. Now that also much more helpful, because notice that it took into consideration that October has 31 days. Now let's see a practical example of how you can use this in your code, the date object and the time delta object. Imagine that you are working for a website and you are asked to restrict user registration to people who are 18 years or older. Let's work that and see what we can do. Diff is adult. We'll write our function that will return true or false according to the user age, and this will take the user year, month, and day. In our function, the first thing we need to do, let's call our function here, and is adult. It needs 3 arguments. Let's give it the first argument as 2000 for 25th of April 2000. And let's start with our function. Today equals date, time, date, and today. That's very simple. Birth date equals date, time, date, and the user date of birth, month, and day. And we have 2 variables. The third variable will be the minimum date that we are accepting for registration. Now let's see what we can do with that. I searched online and I saw a lot of wrong advice of how to deal with a situation like that. Now let's see the wrong approach of doing it as a start. Min date. People are advising actually that you go with today and you use the time delta. Everybody likes to use the time delta, which is actually correct in some way. And let's see date, time delta. And the time delta actually doesn't take a year, so we need to stick with days. And people are advising each other to go with 365 multiplied by 18. 365 days multiplied by 18 years should give you the year. And let's try that and see what we can do. Today, let's print these 3 variables today. And we need to print that, print today. Let's print the birth date. And let's print the min date. Let's see what we get if we run this code. We run our code and we have 3 days. Now notice that you know for sure that the user accepted registration date should be 25th of October, but here you have 28th. This is because the year is actually not 365 days. The calculation is too complex to talk about now, but actually there is leap year and there is many other factors that goes into this. It's not like that you can just take the 1 year leap every 4 years. It's a little bit more involved than that, but let's keep it as simple as we can. This is a beginner tutorial. Now, this is wrong date. Let's try to make this a better date. Min date. Let's go with date time. And we go with date. We construct the date object where the year will be today, year, the current year, minus 18. Now, this is a better solution as a start, and we'll see why. And the minimum month and day will be today and the current month. So we will go with month and day, and today, month, and today, day. Notice that today month will return like today.month, today.day will return the day and a month from our current date. These are attributes of the date object. Let's run that and see what it returns. Let's get rid of this one and see if we got any closer to our date. Let's run that, and it actually returned a much better value. It is the 23rd of 10, 2002, and that's 18 years from 18 years in the past from today. Now this is much better solution than the first one, and this is a good solution. All we need to do now, if per date bigger than min date, return false, else return true. Now let's run our code. Let's print the result here, print, and let's run it. And it returned true. Let's try it with a date. That should return a false, and anybody who's born after 23rd should return false, and let's run our code, and it returned false. Now this is fine for now. Let's try with something a little bit more different. Let's go with the year 2002 and 29. Let's try that and see what it returns, and our function returns true. Now let's go with 2001 with the same date, and now we will get a little different result. Now notice that we have value error date out of range. We don't want to go into situations like that, so we need to know that the user date is actually always correct. Now you need to validate your date before passing them to the function. The function will actually, the birth date will create a correct date for you as long as you are giving it same values. 2001 February 29 doesn't exist. So how we can fix that? We need to validate the user age. We can wrap this in a try statement. In this tutorial, we still didn't talk about the try statement, but in this case, we need a try statement. Our try statement will take all these variables, and the try statement now will not throw an error, and we can just accept. I don't want to go into details. You will see that in the future, but generally, this is to suppress the error. In this case, I'm using it just to suppress the error. Will return false. I'm doing that because we didn't go for the user, or actually for the try except statements until now. I don't want to talk about them in this video, but generally this will not return error. It will just return false if the date is incorrect. And let's run our code in this case, and it will just return false instead of all that error that could actually break our program. Now let's see what else can go wrong in this function. We don't need that. Let's get rid of it. Imagine that today's date is datetime.date, and it's 2020 February 29th. This is a valid date. Let's try to run our function and see what happens in this case. Here, let's change this date to a valid date. Let's go with 2004 and 20th. Let's say this function and see if it runs correctly. And it returned false. That shouldn't happen. This is a valid date. The user age is valid, and it returned false. Let's see what that happened. I will get rid of the try statement because it's suppressing the error that actually happened. Let's run this. Notice that the error is day out of range for month, and it is for min date this time. I constructed the incorrect min date object. Why? Because 29th, I took the 29th, I took the 2, but minus 18 will go 2002. 2002 didn't have 29th of February. Let's fix that and see how we can go about fixing it. If today month equals 2 and today day equals 29th, today month equals 2, and today month equals 28. Else today month equals day, today month, and today day, started strong here. Today day, and today day equals today day. Day and month. What I'm doing here, if today's is a 29th of February, I will just put it one day less. Let's run that and see if that returns any better result. And we run our code and it returned true. That's the expected behavior from this function. Now, this is much easier than going around it in a different way. Now let's test function with a different date, and let's go with 2002, and let's go with 2, and let's go with the 28th. Let's see how that returns, and it should return true. It did return true, and for any date after that it should return false. 1st of March, and let's run our code, and it returned false as expected. The next thing I would like to show is working with times and date times objects. Let's get rid of that and let's see how we can work with time. The datetime module allows us to work with time, and you can create your own time objects. Let's try that and see how that goes. Let's go with the time object, time, or my time equals date time, and you can supply different arguments to this function. Let's try with one argument, or let's try without arguments and see what we get if we call time alone. And let's run our code and it will return, actually, oh, I didn't print that. Let me print it, print my time. And let's run that and it will return just 0, 0, 0. I didn't supply the function with any arguments, so it returned 0. So let me just create a few of them so we can see the differences. My time and 2, 3, 4. The first one I will supply it with only the one argument. The second one will supply it with 2 arguments, and the third one will supply it with 15 and 30. And let's go with 59 or 58, and let's create even another one and give it another argument, and let's go with something like 1000 or 860. Now let's run these and see what we can get from all that. Let's just change the names of these, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We will run these and then explain what happened in each one of them. To save time, I'm just printing these like that. Let's run this code and see what it returns. And when we run our code, now we have different values. The first one is time without arguments, return 0 time. The second one, I supply it only with the hour. The time goes hour, minute, second, and microsecond. So we have 15 alone, which is 3 p.m. We have 15:30 because I gave it 2 arguments. The function after that, I gave it also the second argument, and the function after that, I gave it the microsecond argument. Now, with these values, you can actually work with their attributes. So let's try to see here what we can get with that number 5. Let's go with number 5. Let's print it as is, and after that, we go with hour, minute, and second. For now, we don't want to go for the microseconds, but you can try it at home. Microsecond can return you the other values. Hour, minute, second, and let's print that and see what we get from our functions. And notice that it can break my values into attribute, has attribute of the values that within it. So the last one, 15, 30, 58, and it returned these values correctly. Now, how about getting the current time? Now, notice when I ran my function without argument, it just returned an empty or 0 time. With one argument, it took the hour. With 2 arguments, the hour and minute, and with 3 arguments, the hour, minute, second. So there is no way for me to create it this way. And that's where we come to the datetime objects. Now, datetime objects are a little bit different because they are a combination of date and time. Let's run that and see how it goes. Datetime1 equals datetime, date, time, and you can ask it for now. The now object will return actually the current datetime object. Let's try that. We'll print dt1, and let's see what we can get from that, and clear our terminal and run our code, and notice that it returned datetime object. Now this is a string, as we said, it's because of the print function, but this is actually datetime object. Let's see what we can do with that, if we can access its argument. So here I will not write all of them, and let's try just the hour and see how that goes, or the minute. Let's print these, and let's keep the datetime object itself on the screen so we can see what it is. So we are printing the datetime, and then we are taking the year alone and the minutes alone. And if we run our code, it will actually, here is the year, here is the minute, and you can try month, day, hour, minute, second, and all that, and it will work fine. Now, how about the current time? Datetime allows you to actually access the date and time object. So print dt1 date and print dt2, print dt1 and time. And let's try that. Let's remove these for now. Let's just keep this at the top, and let's remove these, we don't need them for now. And we run our code, and it actually returned me the date alone and the time alone, because dt1 is an object of datetime, and it has a date and a time inside it. So if you want to access the current time equals date time and date time. Now notice this syntax might be new to you if you are new to programming, and dot after that, because notice I access dt after dot day. Now all I have to do is go with time here, and this will return me the current time. Print current time, and let's see that, and it should return the current time. Notice that it returned the current time, and here we are, the same as our function. Now let's see what we have in here. That's something that's a little strange you might notice in this function. Notice that the current time in this case is a little bit different. Notice that here, this is the datetime object, the first one I created. This is different than it. And here, when I access the datetime, it returned the datetime from my datetime object. But this is alone, because this is a new datetime object, and it was created just 3 microseconds after that. And this is important when you work with accurate date time. By the way, all these dates and times are my computer date and times. And when you are running a server, you will have your server set to UTC or whatever other time zone. So you need to be aware of time zones. We will not cover time zones in this tutorial. I don't want to make it too long. And you just need to know that these are the times of the server. So when you have a server farm and you are running multiple servers, you just keep all your servers with the same date and time, and you can distribute requests to all of them, and you will be fine. Anyway, now let's go and see what else we can do with that. Now we have datetime object, and we can do some arithmetic on it. So another thing you can do is datetime2. Let's just get rid of these. The datetime2, you can construct all your datetime objects. So datetime, date time, and we can construct our own datetime objects. So 2020 and 11 and 25th, and you can supply it with the hour, and also a minute, and even a second, 56. And let's print these and see the differences. Print dt1 and print dt2. Let's see how that goes. And when we run our code, it returns 2 different datetime objects. You can also do your arithmetics on them. So difference equals dt2 minus dt1, and let's print the difference. Let's print it here. Print difference. Let's run this code and see what returns. And Python is capable actually of printing the differences between dates and times. That's one thing also you can do with dates and times. You have to try these at home. Create as many of these as you can. If you are a beginner, to create as many of these as you can, play with them and see what you can do with dates and times objects. One last thing I would like to show here is formatting your date and time objects. And let's try with our date and time, the first one, and let's just go with formatted equals, and you can use a function called strftime. So let's go with dt1.strftime, and you can supply this function with an argument, a string that you want your date formatted to. So let's try the first one. I will go with year and month, and I will go also with the day. So let's go with our day. Let's print it just like that. That will make it much easier to read, and you can access the hour using the I. You can also access the minute using the capital M, and you can access the P. Now let's see what that returns and how we can work with that. Let's print formatted. We don't need the differences now. We don't need this one. We just need our date time, and we will need to print the formatted value of that. And let's run our code, and notice that it formatted my string into a different format. So how it goes, you supply it with the format arguments. There is a long list of these, and you can use them. You can see them at the python.org site. So the capital Y will return the year in 4 digits format. So notice how I have this. Let me print that again and formatted 1. So we can just do some changes to that and print formatted 1, print formatted 1, and let's print these two, clear and run. Now notice they will return the exact same thing, but let's change the year to make it small y, and notice how it will return the year in 2-digit format. Now you can also access, for example, the month. You can, instead of typing as an integer, as a number, you can use it as the B, and that will return the name of the month. Let's try that and see how it goes, and this will return October instead of 10 in this case. There are many of these formattings. The day will return the day. You can return the month, for example. If you want, notice here it says October. If you use capital B, it will return the month as a full name. So it will return October instead of OCT. October instead of that. You can format these in many different ways. Check the python.org site, and you will see all the values that you can supply to your day and month. You can access even the week. You can print many things about these things, but for our purposes, you just need to know that there is strftime, string f time, and this function can be used to format your datetime objects for display purposes. The last thing I would like to mention here is there is also a time module, import time, and we'll see that in more details in the future, but I should mention it here. The time module allows you to access time as an epoch time, and let's see what we print. So if we access print time, and let's print that and see what it returns, and it returns that epoch time is actually the time from starting at the first day of January 1970, and these are the number of seconds from January the 1st, 1970 until today. It's called like Linux time or something like that, but you need to know that it's just the number of seconds from 1970 until today. This module allows you to do something else, the sleep function. So let's try something here. Let's create a quick list. L equals, I will just have, or let me create just a string. String equals hello, and let's just loop this string for I in str in string. Let's print I, and if I print I in here, print I, this will run very quickly, and it will print the characters in my string as we talked before. And let's run that, and it printed my characters. And you can do something with this string. Time, you can use time, sleep, and let's say 1 second. And let's run that and see how it goes, and clear and Python. Notice that After each iteration, it will delay for 1 second. So you can change your string to hello world, and it will just block and do that for 1 second. It will just, you can supply it with any number of seconds of sleeping, and it will do that, and it will just continue after that number of seconds. This will be useful for in our tutorials. But for now, you just need to know that there is a time, sleep, and you can use it to delay execution of stuff. But we will talk about this in much more details because there is a thread and safety and all that involved in this process. But so you know that there is a module called import time. The module name is time, and you can use it for that purpose. Anyway, I don't want to make this any longer. Try these at home and see what you can do with them. If you like my videos, support the channel by subscribing. Until next time, enjoy.